Hello, I'm Andy Brookes from the University of Lincoln Business School. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity just to chat through one of our projects that we're involved in at the business school at the moment, which is around responsible management. Particularly thinking about different ways to address some of the problems that contemporary society is facing, whether it's about climate change, whether it's about health, and whether it's about inequality and wealth. And really trying to face this problem of much of what we see in business organisations of the world, we can probably class as irresponsible rather than responsible. So what can we do about that? What are the different ways we can manage in a more responsible way? And this is clearly an urgent issue for us, something that we do need to address. People like Greta Thunberg, David Attenborough have done a great job raising the profile and really getting a widespread public awareness of the challenges that we face and how urgent it is we need to do something about it. But it's not just in the field of environmental activism, even in the business world now. People like Mark Carney, who was until relatively recently the governor of the Bank of England, he's now one of the strong voices saying we really need to do something different. We need to rethink in quite a fundamental way. And Mark Carney's argument is that many of the crises that we face at the moment are perhaps because we've started to value financial values as more important than human values. And the Financial Times, not necessarily a radical publication, has also called for something of a reset of capitalism, perhaps a rethink of the way we do things. And it's not that change isn't happening. The problem is that change isn't happening fast enough. Last year, for instance, worldwide sales of electric cars was over 4 million, which was a 43% increase in the sale of electric cars. But at the same time, pollution in our cities is still at a very high level and kills as many people as from smoking. So there's still a lot of work to be done. We've been successful in supermarkets in eliminating many of the disposable plastic bags, but we still put about 8 million tonnes of plastic into the ocean every year. So there's still so much to be done. And the Secretary General of the UN has said we're just not moving fast enough or radically enough to meet many of the targets we've set to become more sustainable. And over the last 40 years, businesses and organisations have sought to address these global challenges and these problems. And corporate social responsibility is something that most organisations have embraced and tried to move forward on. But clearly, corporate social responsibility, CSR, in some ways can be seen to have failed. Global warming is still happening faster than it was 40 years ago, and many of the issues and problems are not necessarily getting better, and in some cases getting worse. One of the influential thinkers around CSR, John Elkington, wrote a very influential piece about 25 years ago, and it's formed the basis of much of CSR thinking. And it was a piece around, it was often called the 3 Ps, but it was about the triple bottom line of businesses and organisations need to think about, not just about profit, that's 1 P, but they need to think about people and planet as well. And this 3 Ps at the time was a very radical challenge to business, to say that business is more than just profit. But even John Elkington, 25 years on, is saying that actually we do need a rethink, and he wants to almost recall his original paper, that it's now not fit for purpose. And I think his thinking is that we've got the balance wrong. We can't really simply equate profit, people and planet. People and planet are much too important for that. So he's thinking of a rethink. And in some way in our project at the university, we're trying to take up this challenge of John Elkington to think, well, how can we rethink this idea of responsibility? And in some ways, CSR and the way it's been approached over the last 40 years is in some ways diluted the power of the word and the concept of responsibility In some ways, we need to reclaim that word responsibility, particularly the moral accountability part of it, and to really make it work more effectively. And what I wanted to briefly chat up with you today was about some of the ways we can perhaps redefine responsibility and what it means to be a responsible manager, and offer a picture of what responsible management might look like. And there's three primary elements I want to develop just to shape what this responsible management might be. And it's around three areas. One is about care, one is about duty, and the other one is about fulfillment. Three words we're very familiar with, but actually three powerful words that we can embrace and take forward. The word care, if we look at the dictionary, is about a feeling of concern, a feeling of interest, a feeling of looking after. Perhaps the parental metaphor is the strongest way to represent that. But in terms of business and organisations, we also need to have this sense of concern and interest for the world around us. So to be genuinely responsible, a manager or a business leader has to have a concern or interest for the wider world and how their business or organisation impacts on people and society and the environment beyond their organisation. It simply can't be profit and growth at all costs. It's damaging our environment and making the planet unhealthy to live in. And the evidence is really, if care is important, actually the way we often run in our society and our organisations is without sufficient care for human or planetary well-being. And a recent study, an ocean study, showed that 100% of sea turtles had plastic in their bellies. So that clearly shows we're not taking sufficient care of the world around us. But in some ways, to actually care, we have to know. And ignorance is often the basis of a lack of care. So responsible management is about a responsibility to know. It can't be an excuse to say, I didn't know we were causing that impact or damage. A responsible manager has to actively understand, be well informed, and know what impacts their own organisation are having, and make an effort to be well informed. And also, what does it mean? Asking the questions about what it means, not just on the global scale, what does it mean locally in our specific context? For me, my business, my organisation, my sector. Because many of these problems aren't just out there as global problems. They affect us in a region like Lincolnshire. It's a global climate challenge that we face, but Lincolnshire is a very low-lying county, and rising sea levels will have a large impact on Lincolnshire. Issues like modern slavery, issues around deprivation and poverty, all of those challenges affect us in Lincolnshire as well. So it's incumbent on us in Lincolnshire to take responsibility and see how our organisations impact on those issues. So that's care. It's about having an interest, but actually knowing and understanding as well, and actively knowing. But it's not simply enough just to care. We also have this second element, which is about duty. And a responsible manager really is somebody that accepts that they have a duty to the environment and society around them. And when we again go back to the dictionary to look at this word duty, again, quite an old-fashioned, well-established word, it is about a moral and a legal obligation. And that's quite an extension, not just what we have to do by law, but what's actually morally right, what are we obliged to do. So it's also about what the responsible manager feels responsible for, not just a legal accountability. And really this takes an existing concept or term, which is part of our common law, which is a duty of care. All employees in the UK will have a duty of care to their employees. And we usually think of that as a duty for their physical health and well-being, to prevent accidents at work, and things like that. So it's a familiar concept. But when we think about responsible management, we're actually broadening that duty of care. We're saying it's not just about a legal duty of care, it's a moral and ethical duty of care. And it doesn't just a duty of care for inside our organisations, it's actually beyond our organisations as well, and a duty of care for people beyond the organisation and the environment as well. And in some ways that will take, and it's increasingly needing people to take a broader worldview and look through a different lens, really. Perhaps put on a pair of different glasses, not just looking through a narrow lens or a business perspective, but taking a wider human and ecological worldview to actually become much more aware and committed to dealing with these problems. And this involves breaking down a false disconnection between business and wider society. Business operates within society and within environment. They're interconnected in lots of different ways. And if we look back across the history of business and industry, often some of this damage was caused to the environment and the mistreatment of people because business had been separated from the environment. When many of the wealthy industrialists were very worthy citizens, gave lots of money to charity, but in their businesses they were causing a lot of harm. And in some ways they'd separated their business and wider society. And we certainly need to bring those back together. And this isn't just about thinking about these long-term global targets. Decarbonising our society by 2050 is a vital target that most countries in the world are working hard to achieve. But this is also about looking at injustice and inequality now. Responsibility is about that long-term view, but it's also about dealing with what injustice and inequality we're facing now. And if we look at the current economy and businesses and organisations in the UK, there were 19 million days lost at work in 2019 due to stress and burnout at work. So clearly where we are now, organisations are managing their staff in many cases in an unsustainable and irresponsible way. So responsible management is about dealing with now and things that we can change now, as well as dealing with these future challenges. So care, duty, and the final element is really about a word fulfill. Again, quite an old-fashioned word, but actually more powerful as a word than action itself. Fulfill is about completing, so a duty of care and fully meeting that duty of care, not just taking action on its own. And the problem with CSR and many of the business approaches to tackle these issues has been about talk, it's been about action, but it hasn't implemented or fulfilled. It hasn't made a big enough impact. And that's why, despite 40 years of CSR action, we've still got a huge problem with global warming, with pollution in cities, and all these other issues. So it means it needs more. And often this has been termed greenwashing, that companies are doing a lot of activity, publicising their activity, almost putting some green paint on the company, but their fundamental business is still quite unsustainable, causing a lot of damage, causing a lot of pollution. So it's important that we actually fulfil and enact our duty of care, not just do superficial actions. But it'll also mean a responsible manager has to really be very reflective. It takes a lot of deep thought and challenging decisions. It might mean thinking, is this the right business to be in? Is this a sustainable organisation in the long term? Should we be doing this? Can we do something that contributes more to the social good? Is this the right job to be in? Is this the right profession to be in? So it takes a reflection on us all. And at the university, we're doing the same. How can we be responsible educators? how can we participate in moving towards this more responsible way of organising society and business. But it also means us reflecting on our strategies. Are our strategies in business and organisations focused purely on growth and on profit, or have we got strategic targets to become more responsible as well? But this won't be easy. None of these social transformations are easy. If we look back through history, the abolition of slavery, the gaining of votes for women, they took decades of struggle and social transformation. And it's the same with moving to a more sustainable and responsible society. It will take a long time to achieve that, and history proves that. But that doesn't mean it isn't worth doing, and it can be achieved. But we also have to be, the responsible manager can't be naive. We're facing a lot of challenges and barriers. The status quo, the way we currently do things, is very deeply embedded. Many of us benefit from the status quo and will be very resistant to giving up on foreign holidays, travelling by air, all of those things. We benefit from those. They're part of our current lifestyle. So the challenge is, how can we move forward from that? And there are also powerful vested interests preventing change as well. Typically in a year in the US, US corporations will spend about $4 billion lobbying the government to keep the laws as they are. So there's a lot of vested interests and powerful interests that are resisting a move to a more responsible, sustainable society. So the primary message really is, in summary, we need some sort of post-CSR form of responsible management that's really based on this simple idea of a duty of care, but a much broader duty of care. And we really need the next generation of managers who are going to bring this transformation to a more sustainable society, bring a decarbonised industrial setting into place. We really need all these managers to be responsible managers. And really, people who are at school now, like yourselves, are moving into higher education and moving into workplaces and careers. You are the cohort, you are the people that will bring about this change, and you will be, hopefully, the responsible managers. Thank you for listening.